She returned his lost keychain without asking for anything in return. Completely unaware that he was a millionaire CEO and a single dad. "Hi. I found something I think belongs to you. There's a number on it." Jessica's voice was calm, but her fingers trembled slightly around the old keychain resting in her palm. It was almost 2 a.m. The tall glass tower where she worked as a janitor had long fallen into a cathedral-like silence. The echo of her own footsteps had been her only company until she spotted the object lying just beside the emergency stairwell door on the 23rd floor. It was small and metal, scratched from use but unmistakably personal. It featured a child's drawing etched into a plastic charm, a stick figure with a lopsided cape and the words, "Come home safe, Dad," scribbled beside a faded heart. The metal ring was bent slightly, and the attached key looked pristine, almost unused. On the back, scrawled in faded marker, was a phone number. No name. No brand. She hadn't hesitated. Something about it felt too important to ignore. The man who answered had a low voice, steady but laced with surprise. Yes. That's mine. Thank you. Can I meet you somewhere?" Jessica bit her lip, glancing at her cleaning cart. "I work in the building. I'm on the night shift. I could leave it at the front desk. Or I'll be near the parking garage in about 20 minutes. A pause. "That works. Thank you." Again. 20 minutes later, Jessica descended into the nearly empty underground cavern of the garage. The echo of her boots a lonely percussion against the concrete walls. It was dim, lit only by the hum of emergency lights. She waited near the security desk, the keychain gripped tightly in her fingers. Footsteps approached. A tall man in a dark hoodie appeared from the shadows. He wore jeans and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His hands were tucked into his pockets. And he looked ordinary. Not polished or smug like the executives upstairs. Just quiet. Calm. "You're the one who found it?" he asked gently. His eyes locked on the keychain. Jessica held it out. "It was by the stairs on the 23rd. I almost missed it." He took it slowly, as if she were returning a piece of his heart. His thumb brushed over the worn charm, and he let out a long exhale, as if he'd been holding his breath for hours. "Just the night guy," he said with a half-smile, finally meeting her eyes. "Thanks for returning it." Jessica offered a small nod, unsure of what else to say. It looked important. "It is," he said, his voice soft. "More than you know." She turned to leave, brushing a stray piece of hair behind her ear. But his voice stopped her. "Wait. What's your name?" She hesitated for a beat. "Jessica." "I'm Alan." He held up the keychain. "My daughter made this for me when she was 3. She's 5 now. But she still checks to make sure I'm carrying it." Jessica smiled faintly. "That's sweet. She must really love you." He looked down at the charm. "I hope so." A silence settled between them. Not awkward but full. As if they both wanted to say more but didn't know how. Then Jessica gave a polite nod and turned toward the elevator. "Good night, Alan." "Good night, Jessica." As she disappeared into the lift, Alan stood there a moment longer. Fingers closed around the keychain. His eyes distant. For the first time in a long while. Someone had done something kind without knowing who he was. Without asking for anything. Just because it was the right thing to do. And that stayed with him. Jessica rode the elevator back up. Her heart a little lighter. Though she couldn't pinpoint why. The encounter had affected her. There was something in his voice soft. Tired. Grateful. It felt honest. By the time she returned to mopping the 17th floor hallway, she had almost convinced herself it was just a fleeting moment. Nothing more. But something told her something in the quiet of the garage. In the way he had held that keychain like a lifeline, that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Jessica didn't expect to see him again. But 4 nights later, just as she wheeled her mop bucket onto the 15th floor, she heard it, a familiar, unhurried tread. Not rushed and managerial. Just deliberate. She turned the corner. Her heart skipping slightly. There he was. Sitting on the wide windowsill near the emergency exit. Hood up. Sleeves rolled to his elbows. His eyes met hers as if he had been expecting her. Jessica blinked. You again. Alan gave a small shrug. Just doing my rounds. Night guard duties and all that. She narrowed her eyes. Unconvinced. Since when do night guards wear Nikes and carry espresso thermoses? He grinned. A genuine flash of warmth in the sterile hallway. Budget cuts. No uniform. She almost laughed. Instead, she leaned her mop against the wall and walked closer. Her arms folded. You're really committed to this bit. Aren't you? Alan patted the ledge beside him. Break time. I promise I won't write you up. Jessica hesitated for just a second before she sat down. What if I write you up? He glanced at her sideways. I'd take it. But only if you let me explain the coffee situation. I come bearing caffeine. She accepted the cup he handed her. Still warm. It was tea. She realized. He remembered. They sat in silence for a few beats. The quiet hum of the building wrapping around them. Jessica's ponytail was slightly askew. And she smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and old pages. Alan noticed. And he smiled. You always clean this floor first? He asked. She nodded. It's the only one with decent airflow. Doesn't smell like printers. He chuckled. Good strategy. A pause. Then he asked. His voice softer. So, what's the end goal? You can't want to clean floors forever. She glanced at him. Surprised by how gently he'd asked. I want to open a bookshop. She said finally. Second hand. Maybe with a little tea bar. No Wi-Fi. Just soft chairs and time. He looked genuinely impressed. You've really thought about this. Jessica smiled. A real one this time. Every detail. Even the chalkboard menus. I've drawn it 100 times in my head. I'd go there. Alan said quietly. She looked at him. You read? Sometimes. He said. Sipping his own drink. Mostly to my daughter. She's 5. Won't fall asleep until I tell her some ridiculous story about dragons or dancing bears. Jessica's lips curled. Sounds like she runs the house. She does. He admitted with a wry smile. I just pay the bills. They both laughed. Careful not to let the sound echo too loudly down the hall. Suddenly, Jessica leaned in. Mock whispering. Are we going to get in trouble for loitering? Alan widened his eyes in feigned alarm. Extremely. I've already filed 3 complaints against myself. She covered her mouth, stifling a giggle. Careful. If someone sees you, they might expect you to actually fix a broken light bulb. He leaned back, feigning horror. Don't ruin my perfect cover. For a moment, the corporate high-rise didn't feel sterile. It felt like a secret place where 2 strangers with hidden lives could meet between mop strokes and fake security rounds. Jessica finally stood, brushing imaginary dust from her pants. Well, I've got 10 more floors to go. You should get back to pretending to be useful. Alan hopped off the ledge. Then I guess I'll keep pretending tomorrow, she said, turning away. She was halfway down the hall when he called out. Same time. Same place. She looked back over her shoulder and nodded. As she wheeled her cart away, Alan stood still for a moment, watching her disappear. He slipped the keychain from his hoodie pocket, just to check that it was still there, and smiled. They didn't know what this was yet, but it was growing, like a secret planted between floor tiles and late-night laughter. And they were both just curious enough to let it. The next night, Jessica found him already waiting. Same bench, same hoodie. But something in his posture was different, less guarded, more settled. As if he carried a weight he was finally ready to put down. She sat beside him without a word. The usual teacup waited for her on the ledge, and she accepted it silently, wrapping her hands around its warmth. After a long pause, she whispered, "Do you ever get tired of hiding?" Alan glanced sideways. "You mean the hoodie? Or the rest of it?" Jessica gave a tired smile. "Both?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah. More than I admit." She took a sip of tea, then spoke without looking at him. "My dad left when I was 10. Just walked out. One day he said he was going for gas. And he never came back." Alan didn't interrupt. He just listened. "My mom got sick the year after," she continued, her voice quiet. "At first, it was just fatigue. Then it became something scarier. I dropped out of school to work. Been scrubbing office floors ever since." She exhaled a shaky breath. "It's funny. I don't even know what I'd say if I saw him again. Maybe nothing. Maybe just, why? Why did you make me think all men disappear?" Alan's voice was soft. "I don't have an answer for that. But I can tell you this. I almost became that man. Too." Jessica finally looked up. Her brow furrowed. "I wasn't a great father," he admitted, his eyes cast down at his hands. "Not in the beginning. I thought working late, making money, covering bills. I thought that meant I was doing my job." He took a steadying breath. "But then one night, Julie Amy daughter, she asked me something. She was holding one of her drawings. And she said, 'Why do I only see you in pictures, Daddy?'" Jessica's eyes widened slightly. Alan's voice cracked. "Just a fraction. She was 4. And she said it like she wasn't angry. Just curious. Like she had already accepted it as fact. Jessica was silent. Her heart aching for the little girl she'd never met. That night. Alan continued. I sat outside her room for an hour. I didn't even go in. I just watched her sleep and thought. What am I doing? He swallowed hard. I changed after that. I come home early now. I read her bedtime stories. I eat dinner with her. Even if it's just cereal. I don't take meetings after 6. And I never, ever leave without saying goodbye. Jessica let the words settle in the shared silence. Then she said softly. She's lucky. I wasn't always the man she deserved. He said, looking at her directly. But I'm trying every day to become him. There was a long pause. Then Alan turned to her. You know why I noticed you that first night? You didn't ask questions. You didn't expect anything. You saw something important and treated it with care. Jessica blinked. Taken aback. You show up. He said simply. Even when no one's watching. That's rare. She looked down. A flush creeping up her neck. No one had ever said something like that to her. Alan let the silence stretch before adding. I think being present isn't just about being there. It's about really showing up for people. You've been showing up for your mom. For strangers. Even for me. Jessica finally met his gaze. And for the first time. She didn't see a hoodie or a mystery or a man who wandered the halls at night. She saw someone who had lost. Who had learned. And who had chosen to stay. And something inside her shifted. Just a little. But just enough. She set her cup down and said softly. It's nice not having to carry all the weight alone. Alan nodded. You never should have had to. For a moment. Nothing else mattered. Not titles. Not money. Not secrets. Just two people in the middle of the night. Finally seen by someone else. And sometimes. That was enough to start healing. The television in the janitor's break room rarely showed anything other than muted news loops or game highlights no one watched. Jessica usually ignored it. That night. She stood by the microwave. Arms crossed over her sweatshirt. Waiting for her cheap bowl of soup to rotate its way to edible. Her shoulders were sore. Her feet ached. The familiar drone of the news broadcast barely registered until a name made her freeze. Alan Reed. CEO of Reed Tech. Today announced a new initiative focused on AI infrastructure for underfunded school systems. Her head turned slowly toward the screen. And there he was. The man behind the podium wore a perfectly tailored navy suit. His hair was neat. His smile was poised. And every movement was deliberate. The Alan on the screen was the embodiment of control, commanding. Charming. Crisp. Jessica's hands dropped to her sides. Her chest hollowing out. It was him. The night guy. Her night guy. Except he wasn't. Images flashed across the screen, conference rooms. Investor meetings. Ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Then a still photo appeared, Alan. Kneeling beside a little girl in a white dress. Both of them laughing beneath a cascade of balloons. Julia. Jessica's knees buckled slightly. And she caught herself on the edge of the counter. Her breath felt thin. It didn't make sense. And yet. It made perfect. Awful sense. The calm assurance in his voice. The way he listened so fully. The weight behind his every word. Of course he wasn't some nameless guard. Of course the warmth and gravity he carried belonged to someone powerful. But he never said. He never told her. He let her pour her heart out. Night after night. While he drank his tea and held on to his secret. Her stomach twisted. He had lied. Or maybe not outright. But he had allowed her to believe something false. He had worn the hoodie-like armor and let her think he was one of her people, the late shift. Overlooked kind. The ones who swept around important people like ghosts in the night. She wasn't mad that he was rich. She was furious because he let her be vulnerable with a stranger while he hid behind a multi-million-dollar curtain. She left her soup on the counter. Still spinning in the microwave. And walked out. The next night. She didn't go to the 15th floor. Nor the one after that. She changed her route. Asked her supervisor for earlier hours. Making up an excuse about needing more daylight to help care for her mom. Anything to avoid the places where they used to talk. Where silence had once felt comfortable and sacred. Now. It just echoed with deceit. He still left tea for her. Carefully balanced cups appeared on her cart handle. Right where he used to place them. First chamomile. Then green tea. Then peppermint. No notes. No jokes. Just the warmth. And the ache that came with it. She didn't touch them not because she didn't want to. But because she wanted to far too much. She scrubbed harder. Cleaned with a fury that didn't match the soft music in her earbuds. Her notebook filled with things she couldn't say, anger. Confusion. Betrayal. And a deep, gnawing guilt. Because the worst part wasn't the lie. It was that she missed him. She missed his laugh. His dumb dragon drawings. The way he said, "You always show up." Like it meant something sacred. The way he saw her without once trying to fix her. That was the part she couldn't forgive. Not him. Herself. She had let her walls down. And now she was left sweeping up the pieces of something that had felt real. 1 week passed. Then 2. Still. She stayed away. But every night when she parked her cart for the last time, her eyes drifted to the cup holder. Empty and hollow. Just like her chest. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Jessica's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail. But something about the stillness of her apartment. The way the sunlight fell through her faded blinds. Made her swipe to answer. Hello. There was a short pause. Then a tiny, trembling voice. Miss Jessica. Jessica's heart squeezed. Yes. Who is this? It's Julia. The voice said shyly. Daddy said you tell better stories than books. Can you come tell one today? Jessica closed her eyes. Julia. She hadn't heard that name aloud in weeks. Not since she'd walked away from the late-night talks. The tea. And the quiet way Alan had looked at her. I don't know. She started. Her voice faltering. But Julia didn't give her time to finish. Daddy's been sad. The little girl whispered. Her voice full of a child's unfiltered truth. But not when you're around. Jessica swallowed hard. The silence that followed was heavier than any story she could ever tell. She looked around her tiny apartment, the half-folded laundry. The half-read book on her pillow. Her own reflection in the mirror. She didn't owe him anything. But that wasn't the point. This was about a little girl. "I'll come," she said softly. An hour later. She stood at the foot of a narrow walkway lined with marigolds. The townhouse was cozy. Painted a soft blue with shutters that needed a fresh coat of paint. It looked like a home. She hesitated, lifting her hand to knock. When the door burst open before her knuckles touched the wood, Julia launched herself out with the sheer velocity of joy. Jessica caught her mid-run, her arms instinctively going around the little girl's shoulders. "I missed you," Julia said into her sweater. Her voice muffled but certain. Jessica's throat tightened. "I missed you too, little lion." Then she looked up. And there he was. Alan. Standing in the doorway. No hoodie. Just a simple button-down shirt. Sleeves casually rolled. His expression unreadable yet entirely open. No smugness. No pity. Just presence. Jessica held Julia's hand and stood slowly. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he echoed, his voice a little hoarse. Nothing more was needed. The house was warm in the way only lived-in homes are. There was a quiet clutter of toys tucked beside a bookshelf. Dishes drying on a rack. And a hand-drawn picture on the fridge labeled, "My Family," with 3 brightly colored stick figures. Jessica tried not to stare. She and Julia settled onto a deep gray couch. The kind that held stories in its cushions. Alan sat on the floor nearby. Not intruding. But not distant either. Julia placed a familiar book in Jessica's lap. Its spine was taped. Its pages worn and marked with sticker stars. "You ready?" Jessica smiled. Julia nodded and curled up beside her. "Once upon a time," Jessica began, her voice softening into a familiar rhythm. "There was a small, fierce girl who lived in a very tall castle. She gave the dragon snorts and the king grumbles." Julia giggled. Wide-eyed. Alan didn't speak. He didn't need to. The way he looked at Jessica said everything: admiration, relief, and something that looked a lot like home. When the final sentence fell like a hush across the room, Julia clapped once. Then nestled against Jessica's side, yawning, as if sleep had unlocked her final truth. She mumbled, "Daddy smiles more since he met you." Jessica froze. Alan looked down. His hands clasped loosely in his lap. Jessica brushed a strand of hair from Julia's cheek. "I think he helped me smile, too." She looked up. And Alan was already looking at her. There was nothing between them now. No suits. No schedules. No secrets. She stood and walked toward him slowly, her heart in her throat. When she reached him, she held out her hand. Alan took it. No promises. No apologies. Just a quiet beginning. Because some stories are too real to end. A year had passed. The sign above the door read, "The Quiet Chapter." It was hand-painted. Slightly crooked. With curling vines surrounding the letters. Below it, in smaller font, was a phrase etched in fading gold: "A place for pages, peace, and people who stay." Inside, the scent of lavender tea and old books filled the air. Children's books lined the back wall. Soft lamps glowed beside mismatched armchairs. And a chalkboard listed the day's specials: lemon balm tea, apricot scones. Story hour at 6. Jessica stood behind the counter, tying a green apron around her waist. Her hair was clipped up loosely, and there was a smudge of flour on her cheek. She looked tired, but she was glowing with a soft kind of happiness, the kind that came from building something brick by brick, page by page. Across the room, Julia was curled up in the children's corner, flipping through a picture book, her legs swinging off a velvet poof. Right on cue, the bell over the door jingled. There he was. Same hoodie, same smile. Alan stepped inside, just as he had every evening for months. He had funded the shop quietly, anonymously, insisting that her name was the only one that belonged on the paperwork. "Hey," he said, brushing imaginary dust off his sleeves. "Hey," Jessica replied, reaching for a tea towel. "Back for dish duty? Wouldn't miss it." He stepped behind the counter, rolled up his sleeves, and began drying cups as if it were second nature. Jessica leaned against the sink, watching him. "You know, you're ruining your mysterious CEO persona. Most of them don't do dishes in old hoodies." He grinned. "Guess I'm not most CEOs. Still the night guy. Huh?" She smirked. He paused, looked at her, really looked at her, and said softly, "For you. Always." Her breath caught. Alan reached into his pocket and pulled something out. It was the old keychain, the one that had started it all. But now, it had something new. A second, smaller ring held a charm shaped like a tiny book. Engraved on the inside were 4 simple words: "Come home safe. All 3 of us." Jessica stared at it, her eyes wide. He held it out to her, his voice gentle. "I was never looking for a fairy tale, Jess. Not after everything. But if you'll have us. Not just for stories, but for whatever comes next." She didn't cry. She just smiled. A soft, steady smile that reached her eyes. "I never wanted a fairy tale," she said. "Just someone who stays." Alan stepped closer and slid the keychain into her palm. Their fingers lingered. "EW." A voice giggled loudly from across the room. Julia looked up from her book, a mischievous grin on her face. "Are you two going to kiss? Or do I need to turn the page?" Jessica and Alan laughed. A real, full-bodied laugh. And broke apart just long enough to pull Julia into their embrace. The 3 of them stood there. A small, perfect circle surrounded by books, tea steam, and light. Outside, snow began to fall softly. Inside, the sound of soft jazz played over the speakers. And from the children's corner, Julia's voice rang out brightly. "Once upon a time, there was a bookstore where love lived in every chapter. And this time, they didn't need to wait for a new page. They were already living it." If this story touched something in your heart, the quiet resilience, the unexpected kindness, the love that grows not in grand gestures but in small, honest moments, then you are already part of what we believe in. At Soul-Stirring Stories, we share tales that don't just entertain, but heal, remind, and restore faith in the power of simple human connection. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss a moment that might just change the way you see love, family, or even yourself. Because sometimes, the softest stories are the ones that stay with you the longest.